Cool.
Okay.
We'll just let it. We'll take it where it goes. Welcome to Rumors and Dreams. I'm Jason Harrelson, and I'm here with David Mahler, who is a fantastic trumpet builder, and he builds trumpets different than pretty much everyone else in the world. We're here to hear his story and his journey, so we can learn more about what he does and how he got here today. So we're at the International Trumpet Guild Conference in Anaheim, California. It's 2024. We are outside by the pool doing this interview. And that's simply because it is so incredibly noisy everywhere we go inside this massive hotel. And, right?
That is an understatement.
Yeah, it's, I mean, your room only has a couple tables with horns on it, but what's it like in there?
Putting it nicely, it's a living hell.
Okay.
No, it's fun hearing everyone, but it is loud. My ears are still ringing, and they probably will be ringing for the next few days or months.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it's beyond what it should be. It's 100 decibels at times.
Yes.
Maybe even louder. And
he's not exaggerating.
Yeah, and you know, I first met you at an ITG conference. I don't know which one it was. It was a long time ago.
I don't remember, but I remember we were next to each other in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which was the 40th anniversary, so that would have been 8 years ago, roughly.
Okay.
But I think we knew each other long before then, too.
Right. Yeah, so that's, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's been fun to see David's work at the conferences, and I have played your horns that I can remember twice. But I picked one up yesterday, and it was really, really fun. You want to tell me how you got into building trumpets?
Well, I always loved trumpet, like all of us. And when I finished college, there was a friend of mine who was a student at DePaul, and he was giving a master class. I mean, he was telling me of a master class at DePaul. One of the people there was Sharon Jacobson Stein from Crown Music Press, and another guy named Bob Reeder, and they were giving a lecture on Baroque trumpets. So my buddy invited me to go see them. And I knew about the Baroque trumpet from these things called records. I'm too young to know what those are.
Yeah, right.
But and one of my teachers told me to get some records of a guy named Edward H. Tarr. So that's when I first heard about historical instruments. I had no idea. I thought they always had valves, and I found out, oh no, that's a newer invention. So I was intrigued. I went to this master class, and Sharon came into this music store that I worked at, and I asked her, where could I get one of these? And she said, here's a list of makers. And then she said something that changed my life. I don't know if I love her or hate her for this, but she said, of course, you could always make your own. It's like, how do I do that? And she said, there was a guy named Ronald Collier. He used to work for Schilke, and she said to me, if you find him, that's the guy to learn from. But there were all sorts of stories about how he took some people's money in advance, and he took off to out west to Utah or something, or Nevada, and people were looking for him, but if you find him, that's the guy to learn from. And shortly after that, another friend was selling one of his trumpets, so I bought that from him. And a year later, I was invited to go to a party, and I almost didn't go, and I was talking to some folk guitar player who also almost didn't go. He said, David, what do you want to do with your life? Well, I want to make historical trumpets. And he said, those are really cool. I love those. You're a folk guitar player. Most trumpet players don't know stuff. So I was trying to explain, they're like overgrown bugles. They're this long, there are no valves. He said, yeah, I know what those are. Those are great. So I'm thinking, I'm going to call this smart guy's bluff. How do you know what they are? And so he said, oh, my best friend makes them. Yeah, sure. Who's your best friend? Ron Collier. In fact, he's looking for an apprentice. Here's his phone number.
Wow.
Yeah, my jaw hit the ground, and after I picked it up, it's like, really? So the next day I called Ron and dialing the phone, and he's like scared to death. He answered the phone, ow. And I was his apprentice for the next 8 years or so until he passed away. And after he passed away, I went to his memorial service, and I was going to go up to his family and ask, is it all right to keep his legacy alive? You know, what could I do? And that was a word coming in my head, his legacy. And these people came up to me, they're all coming up to me, pointing their finger at me. You, whether you like it or not, you're going to keep his legacy alive. Do you understand that? I'm like, okay, don't hurt me, okay. So that's what I was doing. And that's how I got started. And by the way, this is Ron's watch. I wear it with
Nice.
honor. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. People have asked me at conventions, you ever hear of Ron Collier? Oh, here's his watch.
Yeah.
So anyway, from there I started off making natural trumpets, and I had no intention of ever making anything modern. And as I said to Ron, why compete with Bach and Schilke? That's before Yamaha really stepped on the scene. I'm probably dating myself here. But anyway, from there, I was singing in a choir at my parents' temple, and some high school kid said to me, well, you're playing on a Bach, so you must not be good if you're not playing on your own horn. And I was like, trying to explain to him, I don't make these, I make those. And then I thought about it, I was like, I have one of Ron's modern trumpet mantras. What would happen if I started making instruments with the same technique that they used 300-400 years ago and applied to the new stuff? So it's like, okay, I took that kid's words to heart, and I made my first B-flat trumpet, and all my Bachs that I loved so much became retired overnight. I mean, Bach is an excellent company, don't get me wrong there. So, but then I started seeing what would happen if I made some piccolos and E-flat trumpets. My Schilkes became retired. So here I am. And that's pretty much my story. But over the years I did get to meet a lot of other great people, other great manufacturers, and we are in the presence of one right here too.
Oh, you're too kind.
Well, it is true. We're at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Mine are very ancient technology. Jason is cutting edge on, shall we say, futuristic technology.
Yeah, it's a different approach for sure.
Different approach, but yeah.
So the fundamentals are still the same. What makes a horn work hasn't changed.
Right. But Jason can tell you all the science behind it, which is really amazing. And not to say anything to step on your toes or anything, but if you're ever in the Denver area, you need to see his shop. Paul, my apprentice, and I were there a couple months ago, and really, this guy is amazing. So I just had to share that, and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. Thank you for those kind words, and you're always welcome to visit. And is your shop the kind of place that people visit?
They can, yes. Yeah. I mean, when I was still in the Chicago area, I'm in Pennsylvania now, but back then, when I was still in Chicago, people used to come in and see the place.
And where are you located now?
In a little town called Altoona, Pennsylvania, which was known for the Pennsylvania Railroad as well as mining once upon a time. So, quite different from Chicago.
You're liking it?
It's all right. I mean, the music scene is a little different. It's more of a closed community because everyone has to be a local band director there.
Right.
I was a music teacher in Chicago, but I'm still not part of the local scene there, and that's okay. But a lot of wonderful talent there. So, and some of the shows there, the acting and singing there, it seems like these people should be on Broadway. So that's exciting.
Nice.
Yeah. but I still, before COVID, I was still playing jobs in Chicago, traveling, doing back and forth. So
Right. So the theme of our podcast is Rumors and Dreams.
okay,
And Rumors and Dreams is all about, artists and craftsmen and dreamers and people who really have a lot of passion for whatever their craft is. And that can be, someone who's in sports, or someone who climbs a mountain, or someone who builds a trumpet, or even someone who just brings a new product to market, and that's their passion, is their business and their solution, and many other things. And my own story with Rumors and Dreams, I've shared quite a bit over the years, but I look at the Rumors and Dreams kind of title as like a good way to segue into the things that made your craft so special. And that's usually, what were the challenges and what were you trying to achieve? So what were some of your dreams when you were younger?
well, my dreams when I was younger was, I was going to be a trumpet player, and my family told me when I was a kid, you're not going to make it in anything, you're not smart enough, you'll be lucky to work at McDonald's. And when I went to college, they said, you're not going to make it past your first semester. And my sister was a vocational guidance counselor. She even said to me, you're not going to do it. So I stayed 8 years to prove them wrong. So I got a degree in music education, and it takes longer because it's like two majors thrown together. And then when I decided I was going to make trumpets, when I met Ron, you can't do that, you're a teacher. Well, and by the way, as a trumpet player growing up, everyone else was making sounds and beginning band. I still couldn't figure out which end of the horn to blow out of.
Sure.
And the band director, we've all been there. The band director asked me, isn't there something else you'd rather do, kid? And you could see him go, please. I said, no, why? He was like, oh. So it was a big challenge for me. So that's what inspired me to continue on. I'm going to conquer this.
Because it was so difficult for you.
Yes. And then when I decided that wasn't difficult enough, I'm going to play a natural trumpet.
Right.
So even in college and high school, same question always came up from my teachers. Isn't there something else you'd rather do?
Right.
And then when I decided to make trumpets, like I said, oh, you're a trumpet, you're a teacher, you can't make those, you're not a metal worker. And then I made a kit violin, you can't do that, you're a metal worker.
Right.
And I started making bicycles, you can't do that, you make musical instruments.
Right.
So, all the dreams of I was going to make these things, I was going to make them the best, I was going to conquer the trumpet, and whatever, everything I've done in life, people have told me, you're not good enough, you can't do it. Ron Collier even said to me, I hate to tell you, kid, you're either born with it or you're not. And you weren't born with it, and I don't know how to teach you. I think one reason why he was led to an earlier death was because I kept showing up every day. It's hard, as you know, finding an apprentice, somebody who's willing to stick with it. Everyone thinks, oh, this is glamorous, I want to do that, and then it's like, oh, this is dirty, it's hard work. I don't want to do that.
Right.
And I kept showing up every day, so I came back.
Right. Well, that's why you're here today, right?
Absolutely. So, there were all those rumors that, hey kid, you can't do this stuff. And the dreams were to do it anyway.
Isn't that funny how that Rumors and Dreams theme ties together?
Yeah.
If you have these dreams, people are always going to find a way, not all people, but some people always find a way to tell you that you cannot achieve your dreams.
Right.
And they become rumors, right?
Yeah.
Rumors of who you are or what you're doing or how you're getting from point A to point B. And it's funny because this Rumors and Dreams, idea came from my own life, but the first time I ever heard this phrase, and I coined it after that, was from the Yellowstone series was that on Netflix? I don't remember, but yeah, the Yellowstone series is where I got Rumors and Dreams, the concept, because at the end of, I think it was 1883 or whatever series it was, It's actually one of the words, the final words from one of the characters, and it was after they had like traveled all the way across the country through the West, ended up in Montana, but like everything had been lost in trying to get to the West Coast so they could see the ocean. And this character did not survive, and her dying words were rumors and dreams in reference to seeing the actual coast. And it's interesting because as dreamers, we always want to get to something that's really truly unattainable. Like you'd want to do more than you can, right?
Right.
And you were telling me about a project where you're making something out of a more difficult material a few months ago.
Oh yeah, pure copper.
Yeah.
Oh my God! And as you said best, it's gooey.
Yeah, it is.
Copper's amazing.
Yeah, it's almost like a stretchy, gummy material, and unless you either freeze it when you're working with it, or you try to work hard in it, you might be able to do stuff with it. But if you work hard in copper, it can just crack and break. So it's really a difficult thing. You have to constantly re-anneal, and working a bell out of copper can be really, really difficult. But that's something that's, you're always trying to push it further. Your dreams continue. I always feel like, there's the perfect phrase in that show and in life is like, we always want to find that thing that's just beyond what we can do. And with every time you try the new thing, there can be more people telling you can't do it.
Right. And I just heard a quote or read this about Bruce Lee. He said something to the effect of, you have to try something even if it kills you. And if it kills you, so what? But you still have to try.
I love that quote. I've heard that before. And, a lot of people will say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'm not always sure that's true. But in some instances, trying to achieve something that's very difficult, a lot of times is for the better. And I think challenges are the things that really make us grow.
Right.
And adversity, and whether those are challenges you put on yourself or they just happen naturally or externally, learning to overcome those challenges is, for me, almost like the breath of life. It's like it's the reason I get up every morning.
Yeah.
If you tell me I can't do it, I guess that's one challenge. If I tell myself, hey, why haven't I done this thing yet? I should try it. That's another challenge.
Right.
If I'm pushing the physical limitations of what's possible, either playing, performing, or like, for me, I love to downhill ski. If I can't do those moguls perfect, then I think to myself, I just got to try it again. Right. Or learn from someone who knows how to do it. Yeah. And that's awesome. So now you also are involved with a competition related to natural trumpets.
Right.
Want to tell us about that?
Sure. There's the North American Baroque Trumpet Competition. This is our second time doing it. First time was at the University of Kentucky, hosted by Jason Dovell. This year, which was in Fort Collins, right by Denver, it was hosted by Stanley Curtis, who was the past president of the Historic Brass Society. I've known those guys forever. So, in fact, I knew Jason when he was still working on his bachelor's degree.
Oh, wow.
So, that was before being professor at University of Kentucky.
Sure.
Dr. Double now. Great guys, both of them. Next, in 2 years, we're going to be in Bad Säckingen, Germany.
Oh, wow.
And since it's not going to be national anymore, we're going to be calling it probably the Altenberg competition after Johann Ernst Altenberg, who was a famous pedagogical person wrote a book in 1795 about the art of trumpeting and kettle drumming. So really great book if you haven't read it, or in the process of reading it now. Talks about why we have this superior attitude being trumpet players.
It talks about that?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, going back since the beginning of time, trumpet players had special privileges in the court, and we were on the same par as the knights.
Right.
So,
well, we played a very important role.
Yeah.
And most people don't realize that that's where we came from, really.
Right, and most people don't realize that we still have that attitude passed down through the centuries. So yeah, kingdoms fell and rose because of us. And it was an honor to be either a court trumpet player or field trumpet player or tower trumpet player. So we had very, very important duties. And once upon a time, we were the most highly paid musicians. We had the most difficult instruments.
I mean, essentially, you could say we were the modern cell phone of
Absolutely.
history.
Yes. They did not have cell phones or even when we were kids, walkie-talkies. They had trumpet players.
Mm-hmm.
And you had one with the generals and you had another set with the up front so you can communicate.
Right.
So,
and that was before optics kind of took over and they had flagmen.
right.
You know, but then they kind of worked together. We're digressing into history, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So what was the name of the book?
The Art of the Trumpeters and Kettle Drummers.
Okay.
Yeah, Johann Ernst Altenberg. Ernst Altenberg was the son of another very famous trumpet player named Johann Caspar Altenberg. And that was toward the tail end of all the Clarino stuff. But it's still great documentation of history and also the teaching of how to play the instrument. So very valuable. So anyway, getting back to where we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, great inspirations to me were people like the great Kahn, Charles Garin Kahn, and Terry Warburton. Terry's shop burned down once or twice, and so did Kahn. And I remember reading about Kahn, his biggest personality flaw was he thought he could do anything. And the guy did.
He was a legend.
Yes.
I mean, he was iconic.
Right. A friend of mine, he worked for the Schilke Company, and he went down to Anderson Plating with her stuff all the time. And Joan Schilke used to ask him, "Did you go see the grave of the great Kahn?" And he's looking at her like she's crazy. And he was looking at her like, he's, it's like, but Kahn was amazing, and I told you the story where somebody scrapped 80% of my stuff, which was a lot of Ron Collier's tooling and everything,
right.
Machinery. And somehow he had a personal vendetta against me. I don't know why, but he thought that would break me. And it did hurt, but I thought about Kahn and Terry, and they still kept going. I'm still here, and that was several years ago at this point.
Right.
Almost 9 years ago, but I'm still here.
And related, Terry is celebrating 50 years of business this year.
Yes. So
Terry Warburton.
Right. Terry Warburton is a really great guy. We all owe a lot to him. Very inspirational. He's made some stuff for me over the years too. So.
Yeah, he's a legend in the industry. And,
right.
Hopefully, anyone watching this knows his name. But if you don't, you should definitely get to know Terry Warburton as well. And I hope to have him in one of the future podcasts. He's an amazing dude and so laid back and funny.
Right. Funny story. Years ago at the Midwest Clinic in Chicago, this was almost 20 years ago or so, he gave me one of his shirts. It was fluorescent yellow and had Warburton on it, and it wore to community band rehearsal. And these guys are looking at me in the trumpet section. "Where did you get that?" "Oh, he gave it to me." "You know Warburton?" "Yeah." Known for years. So anyway, there was a Chicago Brass Festival years ago, and when I walked in, he said, "Oh yeah, there's a car from Illinois with all these, looks like somebody broke into and stole all these trumpets in the back seat." So, "Oh, hi Terry." So he knew my car. No, he's great sense of humor. So, that's a nice thing about ITG here too, is we're all here supporting each other. It's not, oh, we're all competition. No, we're all here. We're all part of the same team. So.
Well, there's room for everybody at the ITG, and the ITG is relatively small. I know some conferences have had more attendance and some have had less, depending on where they are. But it'd be really cool to see the ITG grow more, because in past years, some people have felt like maybe it didn't have enough room for all the modern music and the modern players and the next generation of players. And I really feel like that has transitions, and now it's way more open to new ideas. And I say that personally too, because the first time I showed at the ITG was in Denver in 2004, and that conference was probably the first time anybody saw anything like what I offered.
Right.
And it was very different. If you saw my earlier horns, and you can see them on my website, there's photos, there's galleries somewhere, but they were very different. And it's because I was studying the physics and trying new things and trying to understand how to make a horn ultra efficient and resonant. And the truth is, a lot of people were not very welcoming to what I was doing, and it certainly did not stop me, and it didn't discourage me in any way. No matter how people tried to express their biases, it didn't really bother me at all, because I knew what worked, and I was a decent player back then too. I could actually play, and I knew what worked. But
guy's a great player. Don't let him fool you.
yeah, I really need to practice. I've had quite a bit of time off now, but yeah. So the ITG is a great place, as David said, to really explore what music and trumpet is today in any genre, really. Even though I've never heard recently any country western trumpet players, because that's not really a common genre anymore, they're here. They're literally you can meet someone here. I was talking to Robbie Best yesterday, and he's like, oh yeah, I played with Saturday Night Live, and between all the rehearsals and performances, we were there for like 11 or 12 hours. It was 5 hours on your face. You don't hear stories or meet people like that very often outside of the ITG, unless you happen to get on Saturday Night Live,
right,
or do a gig with somebody like him. And since I don't gig anymore, I don't meet those people except in my shop. But I'm lucky, and you're kind of lucky too, because we get to meet so many players. You can do that by coming to the ITG.
Yes. So, and this is what you've gone through. My experience the first several years too has been people looking at me like, what's that? How come it's not shiny? And here I am just making historical instruments at the time. Well, they're raw brass, and they're handmade. And I was like, well, it's not as shiny as my new Bossert that I just bought. No, it's not going to be. And I could polish them up, but raw brass will be brown in 2 days anyway.
Right.
And the tarnish actually helps preserve it. It puts on a protective coating. Right. But trying to explain that to people. But now people come by, cool, that's handmade. And there were some people as well, speaking of jealousy, other makers, so I can mention anyone. You say yours is handmade, ours is handmade, blah, blah, blah. We cut out flat-sheeted brass, we make a seam, we hand hammer, and we spin it on a lathe just like you do. It's like, whoa, hold on. I don't spin it on a lathe, it's hand burnished. I'll use my lathe to support the mandrel that it's on while I'm hand burnishing it. And, spinning it on a lathe means, spinning around, you take a rod and you go back and forth. It's still very, very physically demanding, but you're done in a few minutes, whereas the hand burnishing takes several days, and it's back-breaking.
Right.
And since it's on my lathe, it's like, I can just flip that switch and I'll be done in a minute. It's like, no, you can't do that. It has a much different effect to how the horn responds and the sound and everything. So that's why I don't do that. But the same thing that you've experienced, that's different. I don't like that. Whereas now, people are more receptive to that.
I know a fair amount about metallurgy because, like you, I work with metal all the time.
Right.
And I don't know the level of knowledge of all the different makers. I would hope that it's pretty intense. But I know there is a misconception, like you were saying, about burnishing or spinning on a lathe. So my first question in response to that is, do you ever anneal in between, or do you just burnish to finish?
Well, when you are burnishing, it work hardens. And to get it to a certain point where it is nice and smooth, I'll do it several times, so which means in between burnishing it, if I go all the way around, I will have to anneal it again. Otherwise, it's going to start cracking.
Yes.
So yes, I have to do that.
Right. And that's really why I asked that question, because you know, you can learn a lot about someone's process by asking them questions about, you know, metallurgy and how that works. And yeah, the more you burnish something, you're basically smushing those molecules.
Yes.
And when they get mixed up too much, they will literally just break apart.
Yes. And, you know, that's why that one guy was saying that he thinks I have an attitude that it's good enough. And when you hand burnish it, there's only so many times you can do it. And it'll tell you, it's like this mystic thing. You have to listen to it. It'll tell you when it's too much.
Right.
And you have to pay attention. Otherwise, all those weeks of doing that, or days, whatever, you just made some scrap.
Well, and for me personally, I can feel it, and I don't burnish bells like you do. However, I have done it. I've done every kind of thing I can think of to try to do these things.
Right, and I've spun bells too.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you can feel when it's getting hard, and you have an idea of when things aren't going right.
Right.
Is there an ultimate goal in building your bells to reach a certain hardness? Like for mine, I typically am going for half hard, and I don't make my bells. Even though I've experimented a lot making bells, it's not something that I don't hand spin them or anything. I have the mandrels designed the way I want them, and I have companies make them for me. And in the future, like what we're working on now is CNC machining bells and laser sintering, way different stuff.
Right.
But in your world, are you going for half hard or full hard, or what is your goal?
My goal is that it looks nice, and so, I mean, you don't want it so hard where it's going to crack.
Right.
So it's going to be burnished and annealed, and then reburnished to where it's going to look smooth. I couldn't tell you if it's fully hard or not, but it's going to, if I'm bending it, it's going to be soft enough where I can bend it, which means it's going to be annealed again before I bend it.
So before you're finished, you're like close, you anneal it, and then you're like, all right, let's smooth the last little bit out. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and you know, I'll say this: half hard is not a scientific term. It's something that bell makers and metal spinning people say, and even tube benders. You know, like if you're bending tubes. So now a little bit about that. What is your technique for bending the tubes?
Lots of prayers. I'll fill something usually with lead.
Okay.
Another technique is filling it with pitch. Pitches are so messy.
Stinky.
Oh, stinky. And yeah, so if I do anything with pitch, it's outside. For that reason, I wear a mask and everything.
Yeah, it's nasty stuff.
It is really nasty. Lead is almost more sanitary. And the nice thing about lead, too, is it tastes sweet. Yeah, it's really good stuff.
It's good for your brain, too.
What? I am changed from it. No.
You know, the other thing I like is arsenic. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Oh, my God. Don't try this at home, kids. But lead is very sweet. You know, people think it's harmful. Most of the warnings say it could cause cancer in California. So that's why
we're in California.
Right, but I didn't bring my stuff with me, so it's okay.
You're safe, yeah.
And I moved from Chicago to Pennsylvania, so I'm further away from California.
Right.
So it's even safer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there were a lot of foundries in Pennsylvania. They're open to mixing anything together in a foundry.
Right. Exactly. So I think I drooled maybe a little more than I used to since I started this. But, you know, so I'll fill the tube or bell with lead. Usually if I'm bending a bell, because it's thicker, I mean, it's a wider diameter, so you're going to have more material. It's easier to bend with the pitch, so I'll use that, but for smaller tubes, I'll use lead. And a little trick if you want to sweeten your wine, put some lead in it. They used to do that years ago.
There you go.
And all the people that didn't do that are still dead anyway.
Well, they were all in Pompeii.
Right, that's true. So there you have it. That is great stuff. It helps stabilize paint, so you paint your walls with it.
Yeah. It worked for many years till it didn't.
Yeah. until all these health conscious people came
The
out.
moral of the story is don't work with lead unless you
Right.
do our job.
Right, and seriously, when I do work with lead, I have all the windows open and everything, so I can pollute the outside atmosphere besides the inside. No, but and I can't work with it for long periods because I do get really nasty headaches from it.
Yeah,
And it's tough. All seriousness, that stuff's brutal.
it is. You know, a quick side story. When I was first starting building trumpets, before I built my first horn, I started modifying mouthpieces, and I had a big ball of lead my dad had given me.
Yeah.
Because my dad believes nothing will kill you.
Right.
And he's still alive. I just
There
saw
you
him
go.
yesterday.
Yeah.
And he also had a pretty big vial, like a small bottle of mercury, and we would go metal detecting because that was his fun hobby. And we would find coins, and we would just put them in the mercury in a dish, and then carefully not lose any. And we'd clean the coins with the mercury.
Yeah.
If we didn't want to get that out because we were outside doing something really dirty, then we'd just use gasoline, you know, on your hands. I mean, like, that's unheard of today, but
Right.
it is something that people did for generations. And I don't know where that mercury is, but I made a lot of stuff out of that ball of lead.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of my career, was working with this ball of lead. And I made some mouthpieces, and I got lead poisoning from playing on mouthpieces that were either raw brass or had lead on them.
Yeah.
And I learned very young that you should respect what you're doing. And I, you know, partially I blame my dad a little bit because he probably could have taught me more safety. He thought, you know, it would just make me stronger. And I was very sick for a while, you know.
Yeah.
And I took supplements and things to try to help get the lead out of my body. So I'm fortunate I'm still here.
Well, you know, whenever I have a blood test, I ask my doctors to check for lead metal levels in my body. And she's looking at me, why do you want to do that?
Yeah.
I work with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's still very low, but you know, they talk about metal flu or metal fume syndrome.
Yeah.
That stuff's real.
No, it is real. And in our shop, I still to this day, most of my soldering is done outside or in a completely separate room with filtration away from everyone else.
Yeah.
And I have a big filtration system right next to my bench where I could be soldering.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never hooked it up because the times that I've used those in the past, it still wasn't good enough to feel safe for the other people that weren't wearing respirators.
Yeah.
So I've been overly cautious. And if you were to ask Jen or Christine, it's a big concern of mine. And Jen has sensitivity to smell.
Yeah.
If she smells the slightest thing, she'll open a door or she'll go outside, and I'll know that I messed up. So she's my canary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one reason why I don't work in the house,
Yeah.
since I have other people living there now too. It's
Right.
Like, you know, it's like and they've asked me, why don't you do that? For you.
Right.
Not for me, but for you guys. And if I work too much too, it's, you know, I can feel it, and then I'm out of commission for a few days.
Yeah.
So I limit the amount of hours that I can do this in a day for that reason.
Sure.
And you know, the old story about the old makers is to talk about being annealed to the brass. I don't know if you ever heard this.
Yeah.
And what that means is you start tasting brass in your mouth, and it's really yummy.
Yeah.
And then after that,
It tastes metallic.
yes. And then your sweat starts turning green. And I've told anyone that's worked with me, the minute that starts happening, when you start tasting it, let me know and stop. And if you start sweating green, then you really need to stop.
Yeah, in my opinion, if you're playing on a raw brass horn, your hands turn green.
Yes.
It's the copper.
Right.
And if that starts to happen without playing the trumpet, then in my opinion, you've gone too far. You know?
Absolutely.
So I'm suited up, I'm gloved up, I have a respirator, I even have eye protection because I'm overly careful. Because
Yeah.
I want to live to be 100 and be happy
Yeah.
and healthy to 100.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll happen, but you know, it's so I guess we're both saying, we're kind of kidding around about this, but we're also saying if you're playing around with this stuff, or you're, you know, in your home shop or your basement or your garage, and you feel like, you know, you want to give trumpet making a try or make a mouthpiece or something else, just know there are real hazards.
Yes.
And don't take any YouTube video you see for its word. If you really want to know what's safe and what's not, feel free to call me and ask me questions, and I'll give you free advice that is sound advice for safety. And if you want more than that, you could go dig through a million pages of OSHA, but I'll just tell you in 2 sentences. But I'll say this, you should really have the personal protection equipment, the PPE, for whatever you're doing. And when it comes to fumes from acid flux or solder or heating metals, it's a very real hazard. And you should really know what you're doing. And if you don't, get some guidance.
Right.
So I love to put that out there because I have met some people that have been hurt, And, and some, one of my friends worked in a Detroit automotive factory. Sorry, it's all right.
Also, I just want to, since that happened, you need to meet Dave Wonder in 10 minutes.
Okay.
And
I'm meeting him right there.
And there are 15 minutes left on this camera.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
So,
we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
I want to say something more about safety too. If that's
Okay. All right. What was I just saying?
You were saying you have a friend in Detroit who worked in the...
Let's just skip that part. You go ahead.
Okay. No, go ahead with that.
No, I want to make sure we have time. So.
Mine's a real quick story.
Okay. So I have a friend who used to work in a Detroit automotive manufacturing facility, and he got cobalt poisoning. And he wasn't working with cobalt. In fact, he was like a quarter of a mile from the grinding department where they ground cobalt for some of the components. He was all the way on the other side of the factory, but it migrated through the air, and he was exposed because of the currents in that factory. He was exposed so much that eventually he was medically retired and compensated for that cobalt poisoning. So that's cobalt, which is really nasty too, but the truth is lead, copper, tin, those things that seem safe, if you get them in your skin or in your lungs, or those can be really bad for you.
Right.
So,
all right, the natural trumpets, I usually, since they are raw brass, I do hold it by the cord, so I'm not really touching it either. Another thing about safety is when you're in the shop, safety glasses, no jewelry. There's always I remember taking machine shop classes. I am a machinist even though I do everything by hand. There's a picture of a guy, his finger like this, his hand like this. He used to have a wedding band, and since he didn't take it off, he doesn't have a finger to put it on anymore. And one time I was truing up a piece of tube on my lathe. I was about to true it up. It means, take the end of it, make it nice and flush. I was going to take the tool bit up to it. My safety glasses were in my house, and I was working in the shed behind my house. It's like, well, this is only going to take a second. I don't need them. And then I said to myself, well, you never know. It's only going to be a minute and a half to run in and come back. Might as well do it. So I was laughing at myself for taking the time off because, it's silly. I don't have to do that. So I put them on, turned the machine up, ran the tool bit up to the tube. The tube caught on it, and it shot out of the lathe and bounced off the middle of my lens. So
that's why they created polycarbonate.
Yes, you have to. You're going to ask about my bicycles.
Yeah.
My bicycle making classes that I took, the guy running it, who was a teacher, did not wear safety glasses most of the time. And there were several, I don't put these on.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and you hear those stories all the time, and people take them as like, oh yeah, that maybe happens. But the truth is, safety is a huge concern, and
you never know.
We're lucky to have our fingers and our lungs, and not have all the bad things that can happen. Right. So now to bicycles.
Okay.
You are an avid bicyclist, and I know it goes quite a bit further than that. You want to tell us?
Well, I used to race a velodrome on the 12 in the country. That's a bicycle track. It was in Northbrook, Illinois. We sent a lot of people to the Olympics, both for speed skating and cycling from that track. And for 30-something years, I did the national anthem for the races.
Oh, that's cool.
And I figured if I'm playing on a homemade instrument, I should be riding on a homemade bicycle.
Yeah.
So eventually I ended up taking a couple of classes on how to build handmade bicycle frames, and so that's
That's cool.
So I do that also.
And you have your bicycle up at your booth
Yeah,
right
I've
now.
got one of them up there, yeah.
Yeah. So how many have you built?
I've built 2, but
That's
you know, hopefully a lot more than that very soon.
Sure.
So it's just, you know, having my hands full with the trumpet stuff.
Yeah.
Which I don't mind, but it's like, you know, I wish I had time to do everything.
Right. It's there's only so much time in a day.
Right. But that's fun too. It's a lot of the same techniques. One thing they have in common is you get to do some filing. And then when you're done with that, you get to do more filing.
Yes.
And after that, you get to file some more. And guess what you do after that? So anyway, so it's just as tedious. It's metalworking is metalworking.
Yeah, it really is.
But it's fun. And you know, Frank Oldson's son, remember them?
Mm-hmm.
He started off building bicycles and then went to building trumpets.
Sure.
So I started off making trumpets and then started building bicycles.
Right. Did you ever hear about the brothers who recreated the Wright brothers flight and they built their own airplane?
No.
So I don't know the whole story anymore, and that's because I have a little bit of memory loss. But I do know that years ago there were these 2 brothers who were probably in their 70s when they rebuilt the original Wright brothers airplane, and then they flew it.
Oh, wow.
And it was somewhere in the Midwest. I'm thinking it was like near Chicago.
Okay.
And I can't remember the whole story, but it seems to me that their name was, I can't remember their name, but the name Geneva comes to mind. I don't know if it was where it was.
Janinga?
Maybe.
Paul Janinga?
Maybe.
Okay, the Janinga brothers made bells for Silky.
That is them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know Paul Janinga's story?
I'm glad I brought it up because I used to know a lot and
Okay.
I don't remember.
Okay. Paul Janinga, who worked for Silky, who actually is largely responsible for building those instruments, he started off with Frank Holton, and Paul used to tell the story about how some guy was walking around the place, and Paul Janinga went up to Holton. Who is this guy? Oh, his name is Ronald K. He wants you to go to Chicago with him. But I work here. I want you to go with him, and if it doesn't work out, you can always come back here. You always have a home here. So that's one way that show she got started. Paul designed this thing to rotate as you're bracing together a 2-piece bell. And you operate it with your foot while it turned.
Right.
Anyway, Paul, during World War II, was a train engineer. And he and his mom were the heads of the Dutch resistance. He smuggled thousands of people out of Holland.
That's amazing.
Yes, he was an amazing guy. It's, you know, I'm honored to call him, that I say we'll call him a friend. And he used to tell the story about how the SS came to the door and he was hiding in his bedroom. We're looking for Paul Janinga. Well, he's not here. Do you want to come back later? Yeah, we'll come back later. Begin in the 80s gave his mom a plaque. And it was all videotaped. He showed me at the house the plaque and everything, and the video of it. So, what a really great human being he was.
Wow, that's amazing.
You know, you probably never heard about him, did you?
No, I think I did hear about him.
Okay. Did you meet him ever?
No, I never got to meet him, but I do know that he created a process that then became standardized for trumpet making, where he created a deep draw press for the bell.
Yes. Yes. A seamless bell.
Yes.
And Ronald K. Sr. was saying, that's not possible. It's
Right.
here.
Well, and Zig had one, you know?
Yeah.
It's, years ago we talked about seeing if maybe we could buy Canstool because, you know, we saw Zig was, you know, probably not going to do that forever and weren't sure what was going to go on with the company. And that was one of the things that most interested me were the deep draw presses at that place, you know?
Yeah.
And they were actually doing some of them in one shot, like the whole bottom section of the bell in one shot. I was surprised you could do that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Paul Janinga was a genius.
Clearly.
Yeah. I mean, putting it mildly, he was a genius.
Yeah.
One of the nicest, most humble guys.
I wish I could have met him.
Yeah. He was he didn't really read music, but he was playing all these things on the piano, some rags and some Strauss waltzes, and just incredible. He was just having so much fun playing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're literally out of time.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much,
Well,
David,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was really good to talk with you, and I hope we can do it again sometime. And it's
It'd be an
just
honor and privilege.
awesome to have you on the podcast.
Well, thanks.
Thanks. All right.